Evan Gray had lived in the quiet town of Northwind his whole life. The town was small, with only one main street, a few shops, and a long curved coast that was always covered in fog in the early mornings. Most tourists came only in summer, and even then, not many stayed for long. But Evan loved this place. He loved the sound of the waves, the smell of salt in the air, and the calm that came with living far away from the noise of big cities. At the end of the coast stood an old lighthouse. It was tall and narrow, with white paint that had cracked over the years. Many people said the lighthouse would stop working soon because it was too old and too expensive to repair. But there was something special about it. At night, when the light turned slowly, it looked like a giant watching over the sea. Evan had always been curious about the lighthouse. When he was a child, he imagined there was treasure hidden inside. When he grew older, he began to wonder more seriously about who had built it and why it still worked so perfectly. He often watched it from the beach, especially during storms, when the waves were high and dangerous. The light continued to shine through the wind and rain, telling ships to stay away from the rocks. One autumn evening, Evan was walking by the coast when he noticed something unusual. The lighthouse light blinked twice, stopped for a moment, and blinked again. He had never seen it behave like that before. At first, he thought it was just a technical problem, but the pattern repeated again and again. Is someone trying to send a signal? He wondered. Evan felt a strange pull inside him, as if he needed to go there immediately. The lighthouse was about a 30-minute walk along a narrow path that followed the cliffs. As he walked, the wind became stronger and colder. Dark clouds gathered over the sea, and he could smell rain coming. When he finally reached the lighthouse, he saw the door slightly open. He pushed it gently and stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and old wood. The circular room was dark except for the narrow staircase that led to the top. "Hello?" he called. No answer. He started climbing the stairs. They creaked under his feet, and the sound echoed all around him. When he reached the top room, he found someone standing next to the large light. It was a girl, maybe a little younger than he was. She wore a long dark coat and had a backpack on the floor next to her. Her hair was messy from the wind, and her eyes looked both tired and frightened. "What are you doing here?" Evan asked carefully. "I could ask you the same," she replied. Her voice trembled slightly. "I needed a safe place." Evan frowned. "Are you in trouble?" The girl hesitated. "Maybe, I'm not sure yet." For a moment, they just looked at each other while the light rotated slowly around them. Finally, she said, "My name is Aria." "I'm Evan," he replied. "Can I help you somehow?" Aria walked to the window and pointed at the sea. "Someone is looking for me. I saw a boat following me along the coast. I thought if I came here, they wouldn't dare to come closer because of the rocks." Evan joined her at the window. A small boat was indeed moving between the waves, much too close to the cliffs. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. "Who's looking for you?" he asked. Arya sighed. "I found something I wasn't supposed to, and now some people want it back." Evan glanced at her backpack. "Is it in there?" Arya nodded silently. Before Evan could ask another question, lightning flashed across the sky, and the thunder that followed was so loud that the windows shook. The storm was growing stronger. The boat outside fought against the waves, and it looked like it might crash into the rocks at any moment. "We need to call for help," Evan said, and reached for his phone. But there was no signal. "There's a radio downstairs," Arya said. "I saw it when I came in." They hurried down the stairs, the light above them flickering with every strike of lightning. When they reached the main room, Evan found the radio on a dusty table. He turned it on, but all he heard was static. "Keep trying," Arya said. "Maybe the storm is interfering." Evan adjusted the controls again and again. Finally, a quiet voice came through the noise. "Northwind Coast Guard, do you have an emergency?" "Yes," Evan shouted into the microphone. "There's a boat in danger near the lighthouse, and someone is being chased." Only silence followed. Then the radio cut off completely. "What's happening?" Arya whispered. The lights went out. The entire lighthouse became dark. Evan felt his heart race. The storm must have hit the power. They heard footsteps outside. Slow, heavy footsteps. Arya froze. Evan felt her hand grab his arm. "Is that them?" she whispered. Before Evan could answer, the door shook violently, as if someone was trying to break it down. Evan looked around desperately, searching for anything they could use to block it. "Upstairs," he said quickly. "Maybe we can lock the top hatch." They ran up the stairs again. The door below opened with a loud crash, and footsteps echoed inside. When they reached the top, Evan pushed the hatch closed and locked it. Arya stood beside him, breathing fast. "Why are they after you?" he asked again. Arya opened her backpack and pulled out a small metal cylinder with strange symbols engraved on it. "I found this on a beach farther north," she said. "I think it's some kind of research device, maybe even military. When I picked it up, I heard voices. They knew someone had taken it." Evan stared at the object. It was cold and heavier than it looked. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and stopped right under the hatch. Someone tried to push it open. The wood bent slightly. "We're trapped," Arya whispered. "No," Evan said, though he wasn't sure. "The Coast Guard might still come." Minutes passed like hours. The storm roared outside, and the sound of the waves hitting the rocks grew louder. The person below kept pushing the hatch, but eventually the footsteps moved away. Evan and Arya waited, listening. Then, finally, the distant sound of another boat engine reached them. But this one was different, stronger and more stable. "The Coast Guard," Evan said. A bright light swept across the windows. A loudspeaker voice shouted something they couldn't hear clearly, but it was enough. Whoever had entered the lighthouse ran back down and disappeared. Evan opened the hatch and looked down carefully. The main door was open, but the intruder was gone. Arya exhaled deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. "If you hadn't come tonight—" Evan smiled tiredly. "I couldn't ignore the signal." Outside, the storm slowly began to fade. The lighthouse light turned again, steady and strong. Arya looked at it for a long time. "This place saved us." "Maybe that's why it's still standing," Evan said. "Maybe some things don't break when people still need them." Arya nodded. She held up the cylinder. "I'll give this to the Coast Guard. They'll know what to do with it." Evan looked out at the sea. The fog was lifting and dawn was beginning to show far on the horizon. "Do you think you'll stay in Northwind?" he asked. Arya smiled for the first time that night. "I don't know," she said, "but I'd like to." And together they stepped out into the morning light, leaving the old lighthouse glowing behind them, still watching over the coast, still guarding secrets, and still shining for those who needed it most. The morning after the storm felt strangely peaceful. The sea was calm again, and the sky was a soft blue with thin clouds stretched like ribbons. Evan and Arya stood near the lighthouse, watching the Coast Guard boat disappear toward the harbour. Evan still couldn't believe what had happened. The lighthouse, the storm, the intruder. It all felt unreal now that the sun was shining. Arya held her backpack tightly, even though the dangerous object was no longer inside. "Are you sure you want to go to the town now?" Evan asked. Arya nodded. "I need to talk to the police. The Coast Guard said they'd send someone to meet us there." They walked back along the cliff path. Arya seemed calmer, but Evan noticed she kept turning her head to check the sea. He didn't blame her. If someone had chased him through a storm, he would be doing the same. When they reached Northwind, the town looked as quiet as always. Only a few fishermen were fixing their nets near the pier. A police car was parked by the small station, and an officer was waiting outside. He introduced himself as Officer Daniels. He was tall and serious-looking, but his eyes were kind. "We received the device from the Coast Guard," he said. "We don't know exactly what it is yet, but a special team is coming to examine it. In the meantime, you two should come inside and tell me everything." Evan and Arya spent nearly an hour explaining the whole story. Daniels listened carefully, writing notes in a small notebook. When they finished, he closed it and sighed. "This is more complicated than I expected," he said. "If someone came after you, Arya, they might try again." Arya lowered her eyes. "I know." Daniels continued. "For now, you'll both need to stay in town. Don't go anywhere alone. And if you see anything suspicious, contact us immediately." Evan agreed without hesitation. He wasn't planning to let Arya face this alone. The next few days passed quietly, But something about Northwind felt different. Every night, Evan noticed unfamiliar lights on the sea, small moving dots far beyond the cliffs. Once he thought he saw a figure near the lighthouse, but when he went to check, no one was there. Arya stayed with a friendly elderly couple who ran a small guest house. She tried to act normal, but Evan could see she was still nervous. Sometimes she walked along the coast to clear her mind, and Evan often joined her. One afternoon, as they were sitting on the rocks near the water, Arya asked softly, "Do you think everything will go back to normal?" Evan wanted to say yes, but he hesitated. "I hope so, but maybe there's a reason all this is happening." "A reason?" Arya looked at him curiously. Evan nodded. The lighthouse, the storm, the timing of everything. It feels like we were meant to be there that night. Like we were supposed to stop something worse from happening. Arya considered his words. "Maybe you're right." At that moment, a loud horn echoed from the harbour. A large grey ship was approaching, much larger than any boat Northwind usually saw. It moved slowly and silently, almost too silently. Evan felt a cold twist in his stomach. "That doesn't look like a fishing boat," he whispered. Arya stood up. "We should tell Officer Daniels." They ran to the town. Daniels was already outside, watching the ship through binoculars. "That's the special team I told you about," he said calmly. "They're here for the device." Arya relaxed a little. "So they'll take it away?" "Yes," Daniels replied. "Once they do, the danger should be over." For a moment, Evan believed him. But then something unexpected happened. The ship stopped before reaching the harbour. Another, smaller boat lowered from its side and headed toward the lighthouse instead of the police station. Daniels frowned. "That's not what we agreed on." Arya grabbed Evan's arm. "They're not here to help. They're here to finish what the others started." Daniels quickly spoke into his radio, calling for backup. But the signal crackled and broke, just like during the storm. "We need to move," he said. "Stay close to me." But Arya was already running toward the coast. "Arya!" Evan shouted, chasing after her. "We can't let them reach the lighthouse again," she yelled back. Evan ran as fast as he could. The wind was rising, pushing against him. The waves were hitting the cliffs harder with each minute. Arya reached the path first, and Evan caught up just as she climbed the first steps. Below them, the small boat landed on the rocks. 3 people stepped out. They wore dark uniforms with no markings. Evan's heart pounded. "Arya, what if Daniels was right? What if the police should handle this?" Arya turned to him, her face pale but determined. If they wanted to help, they wouldn't be hiding who they are. The figures began climbing toward the lighthouse. Evan swallowed hard. "Then we need a plan." Arya looked up at the tall tower. "The light! It saved us once. Maybe it can again." They rushed into the lighthouse. Evan turned the mechanism on, but the light barely moved. The storm had damaged it more than he thought. Arya examined the gears. If we can make it flash the same pattern as before, maybe someone will notice and send help. But who? Evan asked. Anyone out there watching the coast, she said. Maybe the real team, maybe the Coast Guard again. We just need time. Footsteps echoed outside. Evan grabbed a heavy metal bar lying on the floor. I'll block the door. Arya nodded and turned the gears with all her strength. The light flickered once, twice, then again. It's working, she said. The door shook as the intruders tried to force it open. Evan pushed the bar harder. Hurry! Arya kept turning the gears. The light flashed again and again, sending the strange signal into the darkening sky. Then a sound came from the sea. A deep, powerful horn. Evan looked out the window. Another ship was approaching fast. This one had official markings, real ones. Arya gasped. They saw it. The intruders stopped banging on the door. For a moment, everything was silent. Then they ran back down the stairs. Minutes later, the real special team reached the lighthouse. Officers surrounded the area, and the dark uniformed strangers were caught before they could escape. Arya sank to the floor, exhausted. Evan sat beside her, breathing heavily. You saved us again, he said. She shook her head. No, we saved each other. Outside, the lighthouse shone brighter than ever, even with its damaged gears, as if proud of what it had done. And for the first time since that stormy night, Evan felt certain. The danger wasn't over yet, but they were no longer facing it alone.